Hello, everybody. It's been a few weeks since I've done a video, so trying to get caught back up on things. Pretty close to the end of the year. I figured this would be a great time to kind of dive into some of the big changes or stuff that happened with the One Big Beautiful Bill. That got passed early this year. It's taken a while for the IRS and the other entities involved, government agencies and such, to kind of finalize everything and then had to get, be able to do some research into this. So I was able to do that over the past month or so. And we have some updates from the IRS on how this stuff is actually going to play out. In all reality, my big summary on the tax implications is that pretty much anything that was done during the 2017 Tax Act became permanent. And the big changes were pretty much some small tax breaks for W-2 wage earners at the expense of really the people making over $1 million a year in taxable income. So that was kind of really the my big takeaway, and we'll talk about that a little bit. I am going to try to keep this to about the 10-minute and under. So this is just going to kind of be a very quick summary. If I say something that you would like more information about, please feel free to comment or shoot me an email, and I can give you some additional information about some of this stuff. So we're going to start with the individual stuff, and then we'll talk about some of the business stuff. But the big things are the big conversation was tips were going to be tax free, overtime wasn't going to be taxable, and elderly people on Social Security are going to get some sort of exemption or deduction on retirement income, basically. Good speaking points, not exactly how everything actually rolled out. Tips, both tips and the overtime deduction um, were capped at $25,000. So if you received $25,000 of tips, you still report total tip income. And then you have a line down below where you can take up to $25,000 as a deduction. So it nets to zero for income taxes. Excuse me, but however, if you have somebody working for you that receives tips and they get cash tips, then if they report them, they're going to end up owing Medicare and Social Security tax on that, and then it just nets to zero for income tax. So keep that in mind. The overtime deduction, same thing. It's capped at $25,000. It is only on the actual incremental increase on the overtime. And the overtime is based on the Federal Department of Labor standard. So you're probably your typically 40-hour work week. If you work 41 hours, you would have overtime. Overtime is typically time and a half. So if you make $10 an hour, that 1 hour you would make $15. So you would only get to deduct the $5 incremental increase for that 1 hour. Um, Go for 2025, the IRS did not update the W-2. So both the overtime and tips are kind of on the honor code system. Your employer, or as the employer, you're supposed to provide a statement to your employees of how much overtime they worked that would qualify, or how much they received in tips that they could deduct. But for 2026, we will have a new W-2 format with formalized reporting requirements. So keep that in mind. Um, the senior deduction, it is not your retirement income is not taxable. Basically, they just created what it used to be called a personal exemption. So we used to have a very small standard deduction, and then we got personal exemptions for everyone in your household. Senior people now get a senior personal exemption in addition to the large standard deduction. That is basically how that rolled out. All three of those are subject to AGI, or adjusted gross income. So the higher your income, this stuff starts to phase out and you're not allowed to take it. Uh, State and local tax, that's been capped at $10,000 since 2017. That has now been bumped up to $40,000, and that was made uh, as part of 2025. So that's good for all of 2025. That was backdated. We do get to take loan interest. Um, or car loan interest, sorry, that has to be on new vehicles manufactured or I think they say assembled in America. There will eventually be a list of vehicles that you're allowed to take car loan interest on. Again, AGI limits apply, so the more money you make, the less likely you get to deduct these things. Pretty much everything else was just made permanent that we already had in place, so not a whole lot of things that we can really go into. Most of it's the same stuff over and over again. Some of the things that changed that are kind of negatives, we no longer have any energy efficiency credits. So it used to be if you put in solar or wind power, or if you put in energy efficient windows or an HVAC system or whatever, you'd always get a credit for those things, lowering your dollar for dollar on taxes. Those have all gone away. Clean vehicle credits are going away. So we will no longer be able to get a tax credit for any of this clean or energy efficient type stuff. That is all gone. Um, we have moving expenses are completely permanently repealed except for military people. Miscellaneous itemized deductions is permanently repealed, meaning we can't take it anymore. That was kind of a big deal because if you pay for, as an employee, if you pay any out of pocket employee expenses, those were considered miscellaneous itemized deductions. Those are permanently gone. So if you are paying for stuff out of pocket, you need to go talk to your employer and get reimbursed for it because they can deduct it as a business expense. You cannot. The child tax credit was increased, so that was kind of a benefit for anybody with children. Those are kind of really the big things on the big changes for individual taxes. And ultimately, the tips, overtime, and senior credits and the increase in the child tax credit were basically paid for or covered in this bill by dealing with and making a little bit harsher rules on what we call alternative minimum tax. So pretty much anybody with taxable income over $1 million will be subject to AMT, and they're basically going to fund these changes. So rich's taxes go up while traditional W-2 employees' taxes go down. That's basically everything on the individual side. There's like I said, there's a few other things, but most of them are things that have been around for a long time, just made permanent, or percentages or thresholds or limitations have just been strengthened or increased or whatever. So but those are the main points. On the business side, there really wasn't a lot of changes. Mostly stuff was permanently repealed or permanently put into place, and thresholds were adjusted a little bit. And that's really about it. The biggest thing, um, energy efficient stuff, same thing with businesses as with individuals. Those were repealed. Um, Qualified business income deduction was made permanent. Uh, Section 179 and bonus depreciation, aggressive depreciation methods, they were increased a little bit for the thresholds and just kind of became better. Couple of different things were tweaked, but in all reality, kind of the two biggest takeaways on the business side was one, the 1099 rule that we've been talking about for the last 3 or 4 years now, was that it was going to all 1099 reportings, 1099Ks, the threshold was going to go down to $600. The IRS has been scrambling trying to implement that, ramping up systems because they were estimating thousands and thousands and millions of additional 1099s filed, and it was going to overwhelm their system and crash everything. So they've been slowly phasing that in. Well, the one big beautiful bill bumped it right back up to where it was originally at $20,000. So now the IRS doesn't have to worry about that, and neither do we. So 1099 NECs basically when you hire somebody to mow your lawn or do your landscaping, if they're not a corporation, uh, it does work for your business, you owe them a 1099, that's still 600, or I'm sorry, that was bumped up to $2,000. And so it went from $600 to $2,000 because basically that $600 threshold has been in for years and years and years. So that was kind of inflation adjusted up to $2,000. And the 1099K is now back to $20,000 or more than 200 transactions. So that's a good thing. The real other big takeaway that I had on the business side is the R&D credit, the research and development credit. For the last while, it, the R&D credit's been around for a long time. It has years where it's good and years where it's bad, or it's just okay, and because you kind of go back and forth. And so now we're back into a good. It's actually a decent credit to look at. The problem for the past several years is that you could take the credit, you would get a 30% dollar for dollar reduction in your taxes. However, you had to what we call capitalize the expenses and amortize them over a 5 or 15 years. So basically, if you had $15,000 of R&D expenses, you would have to take $1,000, or easy math, $5,000 of R&D expenses. You'd get a 30% credit, but you'd have to take that $5,000 as an expense over the next 5 years, so $1,000 a year. Um, They've changed it now so that you can expense it immediately again, which is what it was like 10 years ago. So you get a 30% credit and a current year expense for the cash that was actually left your bank account. So you don't have to take it over multiple years. So that's what's nice. Foreign R&D is still a 15-year amortization. So that's kind of the difference. But that's really all the big differences on the business side. Really, just the 1099s and some upgrades to the R&D credit. Everything else was just either permanently repealed because it was already repealed. All the energy efficient and clean energies are gone, and everything else was basically just carried forward. So that's kind of the real big changes in the one big beautiful bill. There was a lot of hype about it. From my opinion, we didn't get exactly what we wanted, but there were some tweaks, some good things that happened to it. Pretty much a lot of the stuff from the 2017 bill became permanent, which were great things for business owners and individuals alike. Those all became pretty much permanent, so we don't have to worry about them sunsetting or going away in the future unless Congress changes another law. So anyway, hope this video helps. If, like I said, if you have any questions about any of these specific credits or changes in the one big beautiful bill, feel free to comment or shoot me an email. And if it's just something you heard that I didn't discuss today, let me know. I can hopefully give you a correct answer. Okay. Have a wonderful weekend.